She called me the charity case of the wedding, in front of 200 guests. And somehow, that wasn't even the worst part. My name is Caroline Bishop. I'm 63 years old, a widow, and I've spent most of my adult life mastering the art of being underestimated. It's a skill that turned out to be more valuable than I ever imagined. The wedding was last Saturday. My son Marcus was marrying Tiffany Hartwell, an Ivy League educated businesswoman with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. We hadn't spent much time together before the wedding, maybe 3 conversations total, but I could already tell. She saw me as a minor inconvenience. The ceremony was beautiful, lavish, loud, and absurdly expensive. Picture a garden in the Hamptons, imported orchids, a live jazz quartet, and a guest list packed with CEOs, socialites, and family legacy names you only ever see on university buildings. I wore a navy blue tea-length dress paired with a small strand of pearls my husband gave me on our 10th anniversary. Nothing flashy, just me. After the vows and the confetti and the group photos, the reception started, and that's when Tiffany decided to introduce me to her side of the family. She walked over with a flute of champagne in hand, and her parents flanking both sides. The moment she opened her mouth, I knew it wasn't going to be pretty. "This is Marcus's mom," she said, smiling like she was presenting a puppy for adoption. "She's really sweet, lives modestly, very humble background. We call her our little thrift store queen." The laughter came quick, polite, awkward, cruel. Her mother smirked. Someone behind me choked on a canapé. I felt my face go warm, but I didn't say a word. And then, the air shifted. One man, an older gentleman I hadn't noticed until now, was staring at me. Really staring. His expression changed from amusement to confusion to something like shock. He stepped forward, slowly, glass still in his hand, and looked me dead in the eye. "Wait," he said, barely above a whisper. "You're Caroline Bishop, from the Falmont Acquisition Board, aren't you?" You could have heard a pin drop. Tiffany's smile disappeared. Her father blinked, and someone in the crowd whispered, "No way." That's when I knew my 15 years of privacy were about to come crashing down in front of the entire Hartwell family. People always assume power wears diamonds and drives a Bentley. But in my experience, real power drives a 10-year-old Subaru and shops at the farmer's market. That's been my secret weapon for over a decade. After my husband Henry passed, I made a promise to protect what we built and to never let our son Marcus grow up feeling like he didn't have to earn anything. Henry and I met in college. We were both engineers, both hopelessly curious, and both convinced that hard work could fix just about anything. Back in 2012, we developed a power storage system that drastically increased battery efficiency. Clean energy was just starting to explode, and our patent got picked up by a major tech firm. We sold it for $30 million. Life-changing, obviously. But it wasn't the jackpot that made us who we were. It was what we did with it. While most people would have bought yachts and penthouses, we studied, researched, invested. We put that money into early clean tech startups, biotech firms, and eventually financial infrastructure. Over the years, we learned to play the game better than the people who invented it. By the time Henry passed away in 2015, our portfolio had quietly ballooned to over $900 million. $900 million. And no one, not even Marcus, had a clue. We never told him about the real numbers. We just said we'd done well enough to live comfortably. He assumed that meant we had maybe a couple of million tucked away in retirement accounts. We let him believe that, because we wanted him to chase purpose, not privilege. So I stayed in the same modest house we bought 30 years ago in Connecticut. I drive the same Subaru Outback I've had since 2014. I wear practical shoes, I shop at discount stores, and when people ask me about my life, I say the same thing every time: I'm doing just fine. They never ask for details. They never look for details. They just assume, And the truth is, people underestimate you more when you look like you might need help. I leaned into that. I learned to move quietly, to work behind the scenes, to build power through anonymity. shell companies, anonymous holdings, trust structures. I mastered them all, not to hide anything illegal, but to stay invisible. Because when no one sees you coming, they never think to stop you. The wedding was extravagant, to say the least. Tiffany's family had rented out a historic estate in the Hamptons, complete with manicured hedges, imported orchids from Thailand, and a 12-piece jazz band flown in from New Orleans. Yes, flown in. It was the kind of event where the champagne never stopped flowing and every table had a custom-engraved seating card wrapped in silk ribbon. I arrived early wearing a dark green wrap dress that Henry always loved. Classic cut vintage earrings, soft leather clutch. Understated, but elegant. I didn't need to compete with the diamonds or designer gowns. That's never been my game. But from the second I stepped out of the car, I could feel it, that subtle chill in the air that only comes when you're being evaluated by people who think they're better than you. Tiffany greeted me with a smile so sweet it made my teeth hurt. "Oh, Caroline," she said, air kissing both sides of my face like we'd ever been close. "Are you sure you're okay with the gift we chose for you? It's cash, since, you know." She trailed off, clearly expecting me to fill in the blanks. I didn't. "I appreciate the thought," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Cash always spends." She laughed like I'd made a joke. I hadn't. The ceremony itself was beautiful, ridiculously overproduced, but beautiful. Marcus looked happy. That was what mattered. But the reception, that's where everything shifted. About halfway through dinner, Tiffany took the microphone to give a toast. At first, it was your standard blushing bride routine. She thanked the planners, the florists, the harpist who played during cocktail hour. Then she turned toward me. "And of course," she said, lifting her glass, "we're so lucky to have Marcus's mom with us tonight. Caroline's a shining example of humility. She keeps things simple. No frills, no fuss. Just an honest, modest life." People chuckled. I smiled politely. But she wasn't finished. "She's proof," Tiffany continued, "that you don't need wealth or status to be part of a family like ours. You just need heart. And maybe a little bit of luck." That time, the laughter was louder. It was humiliating. I glanced across the table at Marcus. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. Tiffany's parents were beaming. They clearly thought this was charming. And then, just as the toast was wrapping up, someone tapped a spoon against a glass. "Excuse me," a voice called out. Deep, measured, familiar. Uncle Gerald stood up holding a half-empty glass of bourbon. His eyes were locked on me. "Caroline Bishop," he said, almost in disbelief. "I knew I recognized you. You're the woman from the Falmouth acquisition deal, back in 2019. The entire room went quiet. Tiffany blinked. "Wait, what?" Gerald took a step forward, brow furrowed. "You're the one who restructured my firm. That shell company, it was you behind it, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Victoria, Tiffany's mother, let out a tiny gasp and dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor. All eyes were on me now. Marcus looked stunned. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. The silence was thick, heavy. So I did what I always do. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin on the table, and smiled. "Thank you for a lovely evening," I said softly. "And congratulations to the happy couple." Then I turned and walked out without looking back. The next morning, there was a knock at my door just after 8 a.m. I didn't need to check the people. I already knew who it was. Marcus. He looked exhausted, still wearing his dress shirt from the night before. Collar, wrinkled eyes, bloodshot. "Mom," he said, stepping inside without waiting for me to invite him. What the hell was that? Last night, I took a deep breath and walked into the kitchen, hoping coffee might buy me some time. He followed close behind. "Gerald said you bought his firm, that you were behind some acquisition deal in 2019. You never told me anything about that. You never told me you even knew him." I poured 2 mugs, handed him one, then finally met his eyes. I've had business dealings with Gerald in the past, I said simply. They were complicated. It wasn't something I thought needed to come up. His eyebrows shot up. Complicated, Mom. The man nearly dropped his drink when he saw you. He said you were part of a shell company that took over his entire operation. That's not complicated. That's major. I didn't say anything. He stared at me, waiting, hoping for some kind of full explanation. But I stayed quiet, because I wasn't ready to open that door, not yet. After a long silence, he set his mug down and sighed. Were you ever going to tell me? I looked down at the counter. Eventually, he didn't say another word, just shook his head, grabbed his keys and left. The door clicked shut behind him, and suddenly the house felt colder than usual. I stood there for a long time, staring out the kitchen window at nothing. It wasn't guilt. I felt it was something else. A shift, like the ground under my feet had changed overnight. And then my phone buzzed, a message from Tiffany. Hi, Caroline, lunch tomorrow. I think we need to talk about the future. There was no emoji, no exclamation point, just that strange hollow pause at the end of her sentence, the kind that doesn't leave much room for interpretation. She wasn't inviting me to lunch. She was setting the table for something bigger. I stared at the message for a while before opening a different app. My contacts. I scrolled until I reached two names I hadn't touched in months. First, I called James Sullivan, my financial advisor. Told him I needed a full audit of my current assets and structures. Fast. Then I called Amanda Lee, my attorney, the one who helped me set up most of the shell corporations a decade ago. Told her to block out the next few days. Because when someone like Tiffany says she wants to talk about the future, it usually means one thing. She's already decided what she wants from it. And now, she thinks it belongs to her. We met for lunch at a place Tiffany chose, a sleek rooftop bistro downtown where the water was bottled in France and the portions were microscopic. She was already seated when I arrived. Crisp white blazer, designer handbag perched on the chair beside her. That same overly sweet smile. Caroline, she said, standing up to hug me like we were best friends who just hadn't connected in a while. I'm so glad we could do this. We're family now, right? I smiled and nodded, but I was already scanning for clues, and they came fast. She kept using phrases like synergy between generations and leveraging long-term potential. At one point, she leaned in and said almost conspiratorially, I've always believed that real success comes from strategic unity. Families that plan together, grow together. I sipped my iced tea and waited. Then came the real gem. We could do so much good, Caroline. I mean, with your resources and my background in business, we could really set up something powerful for the future. There it was. She didn't ask. She didn't even pretend it was hypothetical. She spoke like the door was already open, and she was just deciding how far to walk through it. I smiled again. Polite, measured, and I changed the subject to the weather. But as soon as I got home, I opened my laptop. It was time to confirm what I already suspected. I have a few tools most people don't know how to use. Quiet search engines, archived metadata, private databases. I wasn't hacking anything, I just knew where to look. Within an hour, I had my answer. Tiffany had hired a private investigation firm 2 weeks before the wedding. Not just any PI, a boutique firm that specializes in tracking international asset structures and shell companies. And she didn't stop there. I found a payment through a side account to a law office that deals almost exclusively in trust disputes, high net worth divorce prep, and estate litigation. She was planning something. But what made my stomach turn was the last thing I found. 3 new lines of credit. 2 personal, 1 business. Total, just over $200,000. All approved within the last 60 days. She was betting on my money, literally borrowing against a future she thought was guaranteed, now that she had married into something. I sat there in silence for a long time, just staring at the screen. And that's when it hit me. She didn't just want access to the family. She wanted control of it. I didn't get angry, I got prepared. Over the next 48 hours, I built a file. Not a digital folder, not a USB drive. A thick, printed file tabbed, highlighted, and backed with verification. Just in case it ever had to land on a lawyer's desk. Inside it, Tiffany's financial trail. 3 open lines of credit totaling over $200,000. Her family's estate mortgaged to the teeth, almost 80% of its total value, leveraged through private banking. Her parents' accounts drained, they'd been living off loans and credit, hiding behind the illusion of old wealth. And the piece de resistance, a recorded phone call. Tiffany, 2 months before the wedding, talking to her college roommate on speakerphone, casual chatty, unaware that her smart home had its own local recording system syncing to the cloud. This guy, Marcus, he's cute, modest job, but his mom's low-key rich. I'm betting it's old money, and I'm cashing in, her exact words. By the time they came over for dinner that Sunday, I had everything ready. Marcus walked in first, holding a bottle of wine. Tiffany followed close behind, wearing a beige pantsuit that probably cost more than my entire kitchen. I served roasted chicken salad, nothing fancy. I kept the small talk brief, then I brought out the folder and set it gently on the table. I think I said, looking at both of them, "It's time we clear the air." Tiffany's smile wavered just slightly. "What's that?" she asked. "Everything," I replied. "Or at least, everything you thought I wouldn't find." I opened the file and started from the top, calm, direct, surgical. First, the private investigator, the invoices, the dates, the tracking report. Next, the trust litigation attorney. Consultation records, billing summaries, email inquiries flagged with her name. Then the credit lines. All 3. Their approval dates, the balances. And finally, the recording. I didn't say a word when I pressed play. Tiffany's voice filled the room. That smug, breezy tone. The punchline about cashing in. Marcus froze. His face went pale. The air felt like glass, thin and sharp. When it ended, I looked at him, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring straight at her. "Tiffany," he said quietly, "tell me that wasn't you." She didn't answer at first. Then came the scoff. "This is ridiculous," she said, laughing nervously. "Caroline, you're twisting everything." "That call was taken out of context?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Context? You said you were betting on my family, on my mom's money. Is that a joke too?" "Come on," she said, forcing a smile. "People vent. Everyone says things they don't mean." I shook my head. Not like that. Not when you follow it with legal consultations and secret debt. Tiffany's mask was slipping fast. "Maybe I was planning for our future," she snapped. "Is that a crime now? Thinking ahead." "No," I said calmly. "But building a life on someone else's wallet without their knowledge? That's not a partnership. That's a scam." She stood up. "I don't have to listen to this." But Marcus didn't move. He was still staring at the folder, still trying to figure out how the woman he loved became a stranger in a single dinner. And I knew right then whatever came next. There was no going back. It didn't take long. 3 days after the dinner, Tiffany filed for legal separation. The official reason, financial duress. According to her attorney, she had reason to believe that my undisclosed assets and their potential impact on marital finances had placed her in a vulnerable legal position. It was laughable, and also strategic. Because along with the separation papers came something else. My attorney Amanda called me one morning with a tone I hadn't heard from her before. "We've received notice," she said. "Tiffany's legal team has submitted preliminary inquiries to the SEC." I stopped mid-sip of my coffee. "Inquiries into what beneficial ownership? They're suggesting you concealed controlling interests in public companies through shell structures. There's also a mention of potential insider trading. Nothing formal yet, but it's enough to trigger review." That was the moment everything shifted. Because this wasn't about marriage anymore. This was war. Amanda walked me through it all. The allegations were thin, she said, based on public records, vague connections, circumstantial timelines. But that didn't matter. The real threat wasn't guilt, it was exposure. If the SEC opened a file even just for routine questions, everything I'd spent 15 years building quietly would become a matter of public record. My holdings, my trusts, my name on documents I worked hard to keep off the radar. And worst of all, Marcus. His career, his reputation, everything he'd built could get dragged into the spotlight right alongside mine. "She's trying to force your hand," Amanda said. "Corner you into a settlement before this gets out of control." I nodded slowly. "Then it's time we give her what she really wants." That night, I drafted the offer. Not a conversation, not a negotiation. A one-time payout, $4.5 million. In exchange, Tiffany and her family would walk away from Marcus, withdraw every legal complaint, cease all communication with me, my son, or any of my business entities forever. I knew what she would say, that it wasn't about the money, that she just wanted clarity or respect or a seat at the table. But I also knew this Tiffany didn't love Marcus. She loved the lifestyle she thought she could secure through him. So I put it on paper, sent it to Amanda, and waited. Because if she really was betting on my fortune, I wanted to see how fast she'd cash out. The meeting was set for Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. James Sullivan's boardroom on the 31st floor, glass walls, long table, skyline views. A room built for power plays and quiet exits. Everyone was already there when I arrived. Marcus sat at one end, shoulders tense, eyes down. Tiffany beside him, dressed like she was heading to a shareholders' summit. Her parents, Victoria and Gerald, flanked her like backup dancers in a hostile takeover. Across from them sat Amanda, my attorney. Calm, composed, ice in her veins. We got through the pleasantries barely. Then Tiffany spoke first. "Caroline," she said like she was addressing a subordinate, "we've come with a proposal. A structure that allows our family to grow together with transparency and shared values." I stayed silent. "We believe the most productive path forward," she continued, "is the formation of a family trust. Something multi-generational. Managed by a family board, myself, Marcus, and you. Equal votes, equal voices." She laid down the draft like she was dropping a bomb, a legally binding financial governance agreement with my money. I looked over at Marcus. His jaw was clenched. I nodded slowly. "I have a counteroffer," I said. The room went still. "You will walk away. All of you. No contact, no claims, no future interference." I slid a second folder across the table. "In return, you'll receive a one-time payout of $4.5 million. Gerald," I turned to look at him, "will retain his consulting roles with my companies. His income stays untouched. Your lifestyle continues." Tiffany blinked. Her mother looked like she was about to speak, but Gerald placed a firm hand on her arm. Silence stretched. Tiffany finally said, "That's extortion." "No," Amanda replied without blinking. "That's generosity. You're buying me off." "No," I said. "I'm paying for peace." Tiffany sat back, arms crossed. "No deal." I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, tapped once, and placed it on the table. The audio played. Tiffany's voice clear as day. "This guy Marcus, he's cute, modest job, but his mom's low-key rich. I'm betting it's old money, and I'm cashing in." You could feel the temperature drop 10 degrees. Victoria turned sheet white. Gerald closed his eyes and exhaled like the last thread of denial had just snapped. Marcus didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally he stood. His voice was soft, steady. "If she takes the money," he said, looking right at me, "I'll know." He turned to Tiffany. "And if she doesn't, I'll still know." He walked out of the room. No one tried to stop him. Not even her. Because the truth was no longer up for debate. It was just waiting to be signed. Tiffany signed the agreement the next morning. No dramatics, no final plea. Just a shaky signature, a nod from her lawyer, and silence. By the end of the week, she was gone. Marcus filed for divorce the following Tuesday. Irreconcilable differences. Clean, quick, uncontested. And just like that, The storm passed. Not without damage, but it passed. I stayed in Connecticut for a little while longer, long enough to settle the paperwork, cut the final checks, and close down the last of the shell companies I no longer needed. Then, I left. I sold the house, packed only what mattered, and moved to Asheville, North Carolina. No one there knew my name. They just knew me as the quiet woman who bought the little brick cottage near the river, who shopped at the co-op and always brought her own bags. I didn't need to be anyone else. With the help of James and Amanda, I started a small grant program, just a quiet initiative under a nondescript name. The fund supported young women in engineering from underserved backgrounds. No fancy branding, no press releases, just real help. And then one day, a letter arrived. Handwritten, slanted cursive, tucked inside a pale blue envelope. "Dear Ms. Bishop," it began. "I grew up in foster care. I never thought someone like me would end up working in climate tech. But your grant made it possible. I got accepted to a research fellowship in Colorado this fall. I don't know what made you choose me, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving that it was the right choice." I sat with that letter for a long time, longer than I expected, not because it surprised me, but because it reminded me that some things are actually worth being seen for. A few months later, Marcus came to visit. He looked better, lighter, and he wasn't alone. The woman beside him had kind eyes, soft curls, and wore a simple cardigan with no attempt to impress. She smiled when she shook my hand. "This is Maya," Marcus said. "She's a school counselor, works at a charter school downtown. We sat down for tea, talked about books, community work, teaching kids how to manage emotions. At one point, I leaned in and asked him quietly, 'Does she know about everything?' Marcus smiled. I told her my mom is generous, thoughtful, and quietly powerful." He shrugged. That's all she needed to know. And that was enough. I used to think the greatest power was in being invisible, untouchable, unknown. Now I know better. Real power is knowing who you are when no one's watching, and still choosing to show up anyway. Thank you for listening to my story. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed silent to keep the peace? Or spoken up to protect what mattered? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back tomorrow. We post new stories daily, and trust me, the next one will surprise you.